Google has scrapped a series of planned previews of Gemini, in part it seems because of concerns that it can't hang with GPT-4. Welcome back to the AI Breakdown Brief, all the AI headline news you need in around 5 minutes. Another day, another delay of Google Gemini. For the last few weeks, the only news we've gotten about Google Gemini are, in fact, delays. The latest comes from the information Google preps public preview of Gemini AI after postponing in-person launch events. Now, this is actually a two-part story. The first part was about Google scrapping a series of in-person events that were meant to launch Gemini, and then the second part, which was updated just yesterday, was the report from inside the company that instead they were planning a virtual preview that could come as soon as this week. All right, so let's go to the first part of the story first. The TLDR is that Google had been planning to debut Gemini, which has just an absolute ton of pressure around it. This can't just be another interesting, even highly capable AI model. It has to, at the very least, meet GPT-4 capabilities, and frankly probably needs to exceed them at least in some fairly meaningful ways. Writes the information, Google CEO Sundar Pichai recently decided to scrap a series of Gemini events originally scheduled for next week in California, New York, and Washington after the company found the AI didn't reliably handle some non-English queries. The planned events, which hadn't been publicized, would have marked Google's most important product launch of the year, after it strained its computing resources and merged large teams in an urgent pursuit of OpenAI. The publication writes, "It's rare for Google to launch a major product between Thanksgiving and the end of the year, but Google intended to make an exception for Gemini because it's arguably the company's most important initiative in a decade. The Gemini event in Washington was intended to showcase the technology to policymakers and politicians, which have increasingly discussed potential regulations involving AI. Pichai and other executives have been concerned that OpenAI's Chat GPT has become a household name, and that Microsoft's Copilot features for productivity software, including for software developers, are turning into a significant business too." Now, here was the most interesting paragraph to me. A key challenge for the Gemini team is making sure the primary model is as good as or better than GPT-4. It has met that standard in some respects, said one of the people familiar with it, but the company is still making improvements because it wants the technology to work well globally in numerous languages. Now, to me, the whole thrust of this is very clearly how much pressure Google feels on this release. As of the time of recording, we haven't got any more information about these virtual previews, but apparently Google's team has been for weeks giving private demonstrations of Gemini to business partners, even though they say that people won't actually be able to get their hands on it until January. Anyways, yet another interesting moment in the saga that is Google Gemini, and I will certainly be keeping a lookout for any more information about these virtual previews should it come out. Now, one interesting aside, given how generally Google's other AI model that is available in Bard has been treated, Neil Patel from NPD shared some really interesting information today. He wrote, "Do people prefer content written by ChatGPT or Bard? We had ChatGPT create 1,000 articles on various topics. We then gave Bard the same instructions on the same topics. In total, we created 2,000 pieces of content with AI, 1,000 from ChatGPT, 1,000 from Bard. We then paid people to read the articles. We didn't tell them that they were written by AI based on their interests. In total, 249 articles were read from ChatGPT, and the 249 counterpart versions from Bard. We then asked which one they preferred. Interestingly, Bard absolutely crushed ChatGPT in this one study. 188 of the articles written by Bard were preferred to just 61 written by ChatGPT. In other words, 75.51% of the time, people preferred the Bard articles. Now, the one thing that people are asking is whether this was GPT 3.5 or whether it was GPT-4, and obviously without that, it's incomplete information, but still an interesting piece of counterintuitive data. Next up on the brief, two interesting stories surrounding Getty images. The first is that their lawsuit against Stability AI is heading to trial in the United Kingdom. Basically, a UK court has ruled that there are merits to Getty's arguments that its copyrighted material was used to train AI models, and in spite of Stability's argument that the case should not be heard in the UK, because, as The Verge put it, it said no one involved in the training or development of Stable Diffusion was based in the UK, a UK Justice, Joanna Smith, didn't agree. Instead, she said that evidence from the company and its CEO, quote, raised the specter that evidence is either inaccurate or incomplete, at the very least suggest a conflict of evidence. So, on the one hand, we have Getty Images suing a company in Stability AI that is using their images they claim in a way that violates copyright to train AI models. But then we also have the announcement of a partnership between Getty Images and Runway, which is of course a text-to-video leader. A Runway blog post reads, Runway is partnering with Getty Images to launch a new video model for enterprise customers, addressing companies' ever-growing need for high-quality customized content. This model will combine the power of Runway with Getty Images' world-class, fully licensed creative content library, providing a new way to bring ideas and stories to life through video in enterprise-ready and safe ways. Now, basically what's going on here is that Runway is trying to get out ahead of more business use cases of their text-to-video tools by partnering with the content creators so that they can get around these potential legal issues. Again, from their blog post, they write, "This new Runway Getty Images model, RGM, will provide a baseline model upon which companies can build their own custom models for the generation of video content. Runway Enterprise customers will be able to fine-tune RGM using their own proprietary datasets. This enables companies in all fields, Hollywood studios, advertising, media, broadcasting, and more, to enhance their creative capabilities and provide new channels for video creation by powering entirely new content workflows and making it easy to craft delightful experiences tailored to enterprises' styles and brand identities and to their unique audiences." Now, get outside of all the announcement language here, and what this is really saying is that a lot of different companies and a lot of different industries are going to use these text-to-video tools, and here's a version where you can be confident that you're not going to get sued for copyright violations. Now, of course, what's interesting to me is that we're seeing Getty Images play both sides of the AI space. On the one hand, they're suing people that they say are violating their copyright, and on the other hand, they're partnering with companies to provide copyright-protected versions of those models. It's frankly a pretty smart strategy from a business perspective, and kind of gives them two bites at the apple if court decisions don't go their way. That's not to say that the questions that are playing out in court aren't significant and very, very complex. Billboard recently wrote a piece called "As AI Grows, Artists and Labels Consider Who Owns a Voice." Some record deals, they write, may cover voice rights that could be used for artificial intelligence. Artists are negotiating for clarity and exceptions. Rights are an extremely complicated thing. In music, for example, there is already an established difference between rights that relate to the recordings of songs and rights that relate to the underlying melodies and words. This is the reason that Taylor Swift can re-record her own music. As per the terms of her old contracts, while she doesn't own the masters to her recordings, she does own the publishing rights. So basically, she granted herself the right to cover her own songs, producing a version where she now owns not only the publishing rights, but also the actual recording rights as well. Effectively, this Billboard article is about a new vector for rights, which is, of course, who owns voices and who can use them in what ways when it comes to AI. I think this is a question that is going to get immensely more complicated before it gets solved. Over in the world of big AI fundraising, Fidelity has just led a new investment round in Vast Data. Vast is an AI software and storage startup that has been backed by other companies, including NVIDIA, and the latest round values the company at more than $9 billion. That's up from $3.7 billion back in 2021. From the information, Vast Data sells software to companies like Pixar, Verizon, and high-frequency traders to store data for AI applications. The 600-person company is one of a number of startups building digital or physical infrastructure for AI-focused apps that has gotten a lift from the rise of Chat GPT. Vast expects to pull in more than $100 million in revenue this year, more than triple last year's sales, one of the people said. Speaking of big fundraisers, much buzzed about Mistol, whose open source 7B model LLM has gotten a ton of buzz among AI developers, has raised a new €450 million or $487 million round that values the company around $2 billion. The investment is being led by Andreessen Horowitz, but also includes participation from NVIDIA and Salesforce. Writes Bloomberg, "The $2 billion valuation for a company less than a year old underscores the tech world's unbridled optimism about the future promise and profit of artificial intelligence companies." Now, what's interesting to me is that between their first round, which came pre-product and was once again a 9-figure round, and this one, the company has actually released a large language model that people really like. And if you are interested in the open source competition with more closed models from the big AI labs, well, then stick around for the main part of the episode, which is coming up next.